Hi, my name is Hannah Betts and I'm here today to talk to you about period justice. Some of you watching don't know what the concept means and some of you are very familiar with it. Some of you also know what it's like to live with the consequences of it. So what is period justice? Today I will be talking to Senator Rebecca Moynihan from the Labour Party about her proposals to change the lives of those who live with period justice. We will also discuss the proposals she brought to government around the free provision of period products. Hi Rebecca, we're here today to discuss the issue of period justice and your role in ending it in Ireland. Perhaps you could start by telling us what period justice is?
I suppose period justice is freely accessible access to period products. So if you leave the house in the morning, you don't pack in your bag some toilet roll, you don't pack soap that comes with you. It's kind of taken as a base level that they will be available in public toilets and toilets that are in like things like pubs and restaurants and so on. And ideally I would like to see period products to be viewed in the same way. Like they're not a luxury. It happens that people get unexpected periods or people get stuck all the time, and so I want to see period justice available for all. So we're removing the stigma around period products and they're just freely available, and that we don't think of it as being any different to having either toilet roll or soap in a bathroom.
And what brought your attention to it?
So I suppose when I was on Dublin City Council, I had put in a motion that products would be freely available in all of our libraries and recreation centres, and then got money subsequently in the budget for it. And it had been the stuff that it had been kind of going around in my head for a while, but it was certainly Scotland and their initial pilot project in terms of rolling it out in schools that made me think like, actually the state has a role in this, and it's just something that I've always felt should be normalised. And I don't really like the stigma around periods. I've always been very open about them, and I just thought that it's something that the state should and could have a role in.
Who does period justice affect and how does it impact on those people?
It affects everybody who menstruates, really. So it affects, girls, it affects women, it affects trans men, it affects anybody who gets a period once a month. You don't have to be in a vulnerable situation to end up being out for longer than you expected and run out of access to period products, or have a heavier period than you normally would. And then it obviously affects people who are in financially vulnerable positions that can't get access to the products that they have. And we did a survey for the Labour Party based on legislation that I produced, and one of the things that came out was actually access to period products is much harder in the course of a pandemic because as many places aren't open and there isn't access to the same toilets. I don't think that there's anybody who gets a period that at one stage hasn't found themselves in a position that they have to use either inappropriate products or leave things in for longer or use things like toilet roll. I think all of us will have those stories of where we've had to do that.
Could you tell us a little bit about the bill that you proposed to government?
So the bill that I proposed to government is essentially based on the Scottish legislation because they had gone through a long process. So it makes available period products. It says the Minister for Health will make them in schools, educational institutions and all public buildings. So that's things like local authority buildings, that's things like social welfare buildings, that's things like the National Library, that you would have them available in public buildings, and there would be a list drawn up on that. It has a couple of underlining points in it. One is that it consults with users about what they want and where they want to see them. Two, it respects the dignity of people who are using the products. So it means that you don't have to jump through hoops, or there's no difficulty in accessing the products, that they're going to be there and freely available. It has a principle that where possible it will try to be environmentally sustainable in the products that you use, so it allows for non-plastic or reusable options to be made available. And it also says that the Minister for Health should undertake an information campaign to let people know that they're available, as opposed to, say it once and then everybody forgets about it and nobody really expects access to it.
Do you think that the current bill that the government is proposing is adequate?
It's only one sentence, right? So I don't know what it's actually going to involve and entail. It just says that the Minister for Health may make available. So there's no detail or there's no underlying principles. I would presume and hope that it will be a lot more substantial for that, and certainly the thing that I'm going to be fighting for is universal access. From the report that was given by the subgroup who were looking at the issue, it read to me as if they were very much going to make it available in limited circumstances. And that's fine. I think where you have vulnerable populations, I think that you have to have targeted interventions, but I also want to see a more universal application of something like this, because there is not a government building that you will walk into that doesn't have toilet roll and soap, and period products should be exactly the same.
What can we do to eliminate the stigma surrounding periods?
Talk about periods. I think that's the main thing. Like, I've had a couple of colleagues say to me that they never really thought about it. I was a bit slow to come into today because I got my period unexpectedly, 2 days early, and then they were like, "Oh, why?" I'm like, "Because I got my period unexpectedly and I wasn't expecting it." So talk about periods. We actually need to take away that stigma, because it is something that so many of us go through, and we tend to hide it. It tends to be seen as like this very private matter. And actually, Plan International have done this really good campaign that they're having at the moment, which is like, we need to talk about periods, and people are giving examples of it. And they asked me about when my first period was, and I couldn't remember what my first period was, but I remember the first period that I was conscious of, and it was getting a period on a day that me and my mum were going down to Cork to see my uncle. We were on the train for a good long time. We got to Cork and my uncle only had an outhouse, and I was like a young girl about 11 dying of cramps, and I remember being very ashamed of it. So we just need to talk about periods and say, yes, this is something that we go through, and normalise it. And I think particularly people who don't get periods, they tend not to want to hear about them and talk about them. You're like, well, it's actually quite a traumatic thing that people go through, and if you went through it, you might have a different perspective. One of my colleagues, Aona Reardon, said if men got periods, we'd be tripping over tampons everywhere.
How does the news that Lidl is starting from next month providing free period products make you feel?
I think it's great, but it also shows that if a private company can do it and something like that, and actually just make it very simple, being like, you have an app, you log on to an app and then you go and do it. I think it shows that government can do it as well.
What would you say to anyone watching this who would like to get involved in ending the injustice?
I think if you're younger and you're in things like you're in college, you're in school, or you're ask your college and your school to provide them. Like, by taking that simple step of simply asking, I think you're changing the conversation, and that it's a small step, but that's something that you can do, because it makes people aware within your sphere.